Hello, my fellow fans of the small. I'm Laura Blair, and this is Tiny Worlds, Big Stories. Here we celebrate the artists who craft small-scale magic, miniature makers, diorama dreamers, and dollhouse designers, and uncover the stories and creativity that bring these tiny worlds to life. Whether you build tiny scenes or simply love them, welcome. Today's conversation is one of those quiet, powerful ones that stays with you. My guest is Lisa Swerling, the artist behind Glass Cathedrals. They're handmade miniature worlds held inside glass boxes that somehow manage to carry enormous emotional weight. Lisa grew up in South Africa, collecting shells and shards of broken glass, learning early on how beauty, fragility, and meaning often live side by side. That sensitivity carried her through London and California, into a life shaped by adventure, family, and an unwavering commitment to storytelling. In this episode, Lisa shares how her path into art wasn't linear, how supporting her husband's illustration career eventually gave her the space to claim her own voice through miniature worlds that capture memory, love, loss, and connection. We talk about perfectionism, empathy, and why the smallest details often hold the biggest truths. She also offers grounded, generous advice for artists navigating creative lives in the real world. This is a conversation about noticing, about honoring moments, and about the quiet power of making something meaningful. Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you for coming. It's afternoon for you, morning for me. She's in London. I'm in Washington State. It's an amazing thing. I love this. I want to talk about, my first question is, were you a creative kid? I want to know, like, when you were living in South Africa, growing up on the early years.
I was very creative, but I was also really controlled from a really early age. Like, it was noticeable how perfect I needed my art to be. It really, really limited me. I could make age 4. I remember a primary school teacher saying, "Do you want to try do something other than like the perfect house with the 2 flowers and the 2 minutes?" And I did it. I found it quite hard to sort of break out of things that I was good at. It wasn't a problem because I got so much enjoyment out of it. But in a way, the way I would define my creativity as a kid and even to this day was more about collecting things, juxtaposing things that wouldn't normally be put together. Like I was a real shell collector. I would walk around the garden and count the flowers, and like all of these sort of fed into my being, and they have manifested later in life in a more creative way. Do you see them all feeding into,
Oh, I
the
totally do. I'm
that I
thinking,
do
like,
now?
saying that, I totally see how you're taking the earlier stuff and putting it into your work now. That's always a trip to me, how your inner child knows, the kid inside you knows.
And I had a moment which I still think about. And in fact, when I talk about myself now, I do refer back to ways that I was as a child. So I remember finding there was a car on a dodgy road, and someone had smashed the window. And I remember maybe being 7 or 8 and just seeing this broken glass on the ground and being transfixed and asking my mom if I could take a handful. And she said yes. And I had like this little jar of broken glass. And to me, it was as precious as any diamond. And so that
Wow.
kind of way of seeing treasure and preciousness has totally stayed with me.
Well, and hats off to your mom because she honored that, obviously, right? I don't know if I would have let my kids pick up glass.
Exactly. They're not even allowed to pet glitter. But I had quite a suburban upbringing, so maybe that was like the outlier, and that's why I remember it like, Mom, wow, radical.
I
Yeah.
love hearing about the beginnings because it says a lot. So you were in South Africa, and then in your teen years, you moved to
Yeah.
London,
hmm
and you spent the majority. And I'm interested, like, how did you come back to the U.S. in Northern California and then back to London?
Yeah. Well, I was in London for maybe about 25 years. So I came here when I
Oh,
was about 14, and I went to school. I went to university in the UK. So I'm definitely a Londoner. Um, my heart is in South Africa still, and I go back there. And coming back to London, part of the rationale has been that it's closer to South Africa, actually, in our later years. But our decision to go to California, it was really actually born out of a sense of adventure and very much motivated by my husband. So I'm quite a homebody, and I could really be happy in most places, I think, as long as my home environment was, I had a scope to make it my home and my vision. But Ralph, my husband, who's also an artist and an economist, um, he's has quite an adventurous spirit. So we we were in London. It was like nearly the turn of the century. No, 2010, around 2009. We wanted to leave to try living somewhere else because he's South African
Oh,
as well. But he never really sort of settled for London. He just ended up in London, got a good job, got a good woman. That was it.
that's
I
right.
trapped
That's all you
him.
need.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it isn't, as it turns out. Or maybe it is. We're back here. So, yeah, slow and steady wins the race. But in the meantime, we did a sort of recce to Northern California. In fact, we went to Laguna Beach, where there's quite a few South Africans that we know. So we sort of had this tour we drove from Laguna Beach up to Healdsburg, just above San Francisco. And we were really going only in about 10 days and trying to see if there was a place. The West is still the West. It still feels like pioneering and an adventure, and you can forge your destiny there. That's how it felt. Having lived there for 12 years, I do think that sort of mindset does prevail with a lot of people. So, and we took these 10 days or whatever. We drove through Mill Valley and through Marin, and like, well, what's the big fuss, blah, blah, blah. We ended up in Healdsburg, and it didn't speak to us. And so actually the day before we were due to come home, I remember I was like sitting on the bathroom floor crying, the dream is over. What are we going to do? And then we had a fortuitous phone call with someone who was actually living in Marin at the time, friend of a friend. And they said, are you crazy? Come back. Like on the way to the airport, come back to Fairfax. They were in this little hippie town, basically. And we'll talk to you and see if we can change your mind. So we just spent a few hours. And in those few hours, of course, all the magic happened. We were like, oh my God, what is this place? It's,
Wonderful.
so beautiful. It's so protected. It's real. It feels like a sort
I'm
of slice of heaven.
that the US could give you that.
Oh my God. And then obviously since
I
living here,
know.
we just fell in love with so many places. So that's what brought us here. It was a feeling that it was an adventure, but also a place that we could put down roots potentially, especially as we had two young children. My daughters were about 6 and 8 at the time.
Mhm.
So it was a big deal, but Ralph and I both take change quite easily. And I don't know if it's not really, I'm not a risk taker, but at the same time, I'm just like, da, da, da. Oh, that looks like a nice direction. I'll follow that handsome young man and, marry him and follow him to America. So, yeah, and it was an amazing 12 years. We loved it. We loved it.
I think those travels and adventures definitely fueled your art, which I want to talk about next. So you started with illustration, correct?
It was actually my husband. So I was more of a editor and a support to his illustrative work. That is not my work. It's a common mistake, and people are crestfallen. Um,
I love the work you make.
I know, I'm like this. I do actually love drawing
Yeah.
and life drawing, but it's not the area I focused on, and it's not a
Yeah.
commercial pursuit. So once I discovered making miniature worlds in boxes, which is, as you might have realized, what I tend to do, I've just become like a one-trick pony, and I love it. And it's such a sort of generous format, making these worlds. And it
Yeah.
so beautifully corresponds to the way I think about the world, which I can go more into, that I've been making them for 22 years now, and I've made thousands of miniature worlds in boxes. I have one here actually, that I just wanted to. This is one that I'm about to
I saw that
send
one
out.
online. It's so beautiful. I love it.
This
I
is
can't wait to talk about
Ireland.
all the different things that are involved in the glass cathedrals. I do want to
Yeah,
say
yeah.
if you're listening to this podcast just in earphones, you got to go to the YouTube channel because I'm going to show Lisa's work on there as we talk. And there's a lot of work to show. So please do that. I want to talk about that first one, the one where you put the little architectural structure in the box and you're like, whoa, what is this? Tell us about that.
There was a literal sort of genesis moment, and I have him here today because I'm
Oh, you have
actually
it?
doing
I'm so
some,
excited.
not on the chair, so yeah, like
Oh,
it's. I'm embarrassed to say he's actually lost more limbs since
oh,
I he became my sort of muse. So he is an architect's figure, actually a bigger scale than you probably work at and I work at. And a friend, an architect friend, gave him to me. I don't know how clearly you can see, but
Yeah.
basically this is how he is. He used to have two forearms, now he's only got one. But he's this little guy. He's like got this triumphant look on his face, and he's going, yeah, but he doesn't have any arms. Like he maybe had one leg at that point. And I
Yeah.
was just like, oh my God, you embody kind of the both sides of being human. Like you're so kind of out there and believe in yourself, but you're also very vulnerable
Broken
and
sometimes.
broken. Yeah. And you're sort of relentless in your pursuit of whatever it is you're after. So
Yeah.
yeah, I kind of had him in my pocket, and well, you can get a glimpse of the debris of my lived, my home, but there's just beautiful little bits of treasure everywhere, including I count him as treasure. And yeah, so I had him, and he was just sort of a bit floating in the world, and then one day I had a box from IKEA. They used to make these shadow boxes, very basic, like the equivalent of $5 or something, and I put him on a chair and I put him in the box, and something completely transformed in the space. Like he was suddenly empowered. He was telling a story. The scale worked. So this became his world, the box, and I was outside of it. And I was just noticed that, and I thought it's very compelling because it's not only telling his story, but I identify with his story. So there's something, the medium of the box allows me to tell other people's stories, but in a way that's very accessible to everyone. And so it's quite unifying.
I
Yeah,
like the container of it. So you were pretty immediate with how you felt about it. You're like, I'm going to take this and I'm going to run with it. Did it kind of go
exactly.
from there?
Yeah, but Ralph does weave his way into the story, often in a very helpful way. I made like 4 or 5 or 6 boxes. There's a whole story behind how we became working artists, because we were actually in more of in the licensing industry, and making art for greeting cards and things like that. We wanted to make art that was more meaningful to ourselves. And the way we've done it repeatedly over the last like 25 years is we just set ourselves a goal and a deadline that is quite silly. And then so in this case, we rented a big space in the East End of London. We told everyone we're having an art exhibition, our business partners, our family, our friends, and they were like, well, we better make some art now. Okay. So I had these boxes, and I was like, make some boxes. So I made some boxes. They were super esoteric. Like I couldn't even tell you what was in the boxes. I did use the little model railway figures. I remember there was something to do with Easter Island. So anyway, they were esoteric. They were badly made, but I sold all of them. And my nature is such that I was like, well, that's great. I've done boxes. Now I'm going to move on to the next thing. And it was very specifically gold leaf portraits of Leonard Cohen was the next thing on my list of things to do. And Ralph was like, hang on a minute. That's it. And it is Leonard Cohen's universe. Yeah. And the gold leaf and all of that. I made one. But Ralph said, you look, it's really hard to sell art, and it's hard for people to like your art, and then to sell it is just another level. We all have this. And to
Totally.
this day, it's hard to sell art. I've been doing it so long. It's still not something I take for granted. And he said, just focus on that. So I did. And, it's evolved, but within the confines of making worlds in boxes.
Yeah, and you do a lot of commissions, but you have these wonderful series that you do. I'm just curious, how much of your work right now is commissions? Because you do quite a
It's
bit.
almost all commissions. So
And when did that start to switch over to that? Like, because you
that
were making your own
started
art for a while.
I've been doing it about 22 years. And so the first maybe 5, 6 years, I was making art that was my own ideas about what it is to be a human, on the little human on a big planet. Um, Quite minimalist in terms of what the boxes contained. And then I started getting phone calls like, oh, okay, I love this design. Would you give her blonde hair or something? Like, because people really identified with the
Yes,
figures.
they do.
And
Hmm.
I am not precious at all about being an artist. And I didn't even call myself an artist for the first like 10 years, really. And then I was like,
Really?
okay. Like, I know. It was just like fun. And I think it's because I know why. It's because I am an artist, but I'm fueled by the ideas, the sort of the poetry and the intellectual ideas. And I'm motivated by the connection with people who relate to my art. But I don't have a process that is in itself a very artistic, like meditative. It's not when I'm life drawing, then I'm an artist. And then I'm like, I reach a different state of being kind of thing. It doesn't happen with the glass cathedrals. That's not to say I'm not an artist. It's just it was a different way of explaining what I do. So, but I was putting my ideas into boxes, and then people were like, the reason I go into all of that is because most artists, if they were if they were asked, will you make it a blonde? They'll be like, I'm an artist, I'm not. Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, what shade of blonde? So I just didn't mind at all. And more than that, I just really was excited that someone
Would
would
you say
see
you're
it.
invested in the stories? Because you've got these great stories of
No,
these
of course,
families.
because also it ends up being the most precious moments in people's lives. Like, not just moments of joy and connection with each other and with places, but I've made boxes of people who've passed away. Like, it's an
Yeah.
enormous responsibility, and recently, yeah, I've being told the stories by people, and it's not like I go into their life history either. It's like I'll know one thing about a person, and it's the most important thing about them. And so it means a lot to me that the work is right. And even though the execution is quite simple in a way, I mean, there's some skill, but it's simple format. I know when the figures are communicating in the right way with each other, with the landscape. And yeah, that's very much about being invested in how the person receives the work. Yeah, there is.
They
Yeah.
trust you and they tell you these deep stories and they want to commemorate. They want your work to commemorate it, which is pretty cool, pretty great.
It's absolutely amazing. And honestly, when they don't trust me, then the work goes wrong. Like if they say, yeah, you must have a similar experience.
You're probably at a point where people are like, "Do it, Lisa. Do your
You
thing."
would be surprised because it's just like a
Really?
personality type. Like
Yeah.
most of the time, and at least at this point, I can go like, well, in my
Mm.
experience, maybe we should do it my way. But there's some
Yeah.
people who just it's hard for them to let go of controlling things.
It's not about you.
It's
It's
not
about
about
them.
me or the
Mm.
trust in art. Yeah, yeah. But so you were asking about so the custom work is 95% of what I do now. So of course, from that little blonde, personalization, I've ended up capturing, weddings and all sorts. You obviously you've seen. I've done
Your
hundreds of.
website is so prolific, man, but you have every possible thing on there.
I
I was just going
know.
through 'em going, I have so many favorites. I'm like, "Oh, that's my favorite. That's
Oh,
my favorite." Just the
oh,
concepts and the way you have executed it. And I'm also interested in, like, when did you switch over to the glitter stuff on the back? Because there was kind of a little bit of a transition there with that.
very, very quickly. So the very first ones that I made had no glitter. And I've always loved glitter, as you know, because I picked up broken glass or sparkle. But yeah, within like 2 or 3 years, yeah. And the first one that I used glitter on was actually a design that is still the most popular and well loved of all my glass cathedrals, which is it's a little girl. I have her here. I'll explain why I have all these figures here. I'm not just like incredibly well organized for a podcast.
Oh,
She, yeah, so she has her water wings, as
I
Americans call it.
myself, I love that little person. I love that
The
little person.
caption says, "The world is a scary place, but I have water wings." And then there's just the tiny girl, and originally in a white box, and it worked in a white box. Um, but then when I put the blue sparkly glitter, obviously it reached a new level.
Yeah.
And, like, the glitter works aesthetically for most people, weirdly. Like, it's not kitsch, it's sort of just added sparkle, but it allows you to enter the space sometimes in a different way, you're drawn in.
Glitter means
Yeah,
good things. Like in preschool and kindergarten, you got glitter all over yourself. It's the best thing ever. Or broken glass.
you use glitter in your art.
I
Yeah.
have ruby slippers that I have these little tiny ruby slippers, and I have red glitter that I do on those, but I do have to say it's very joyful. When I do use it, it's fun. It does get everywhere. It does get everywhere. That's the only thing. I'm a former teacher too. I loved using it in my classroom, and the custodian hated my classroom, hated cleaning my classroom because it was always on the floor.
I thought that art teachers had a particular hatred of glitter, actually.
Oh, and I was a sixth grade teacher. I wasn't an art teacher. So I was just like, woo, free for all. Yeah, no, art teachers are a little more precious about it, for sure, for sure. Tell us about the meaning. I love the name. So tell us about glass cathedrals and why it's called that and what that means to you.
Okay, so this also goes to show a little bit about how my mind works, because the way I think of myself is there's an Afrikaans word. We had to learn Afrikaans at school in South Africa called loskop, which probably translates quite easily, but it means like loose head. And it's a loskop is someone who always loses things and, is not on time. And that is what I'm like. But also, I consider my head to be filled with disparate elements that are sort of, I've got them, I know they're there, but they're floating around and they haven't really attached to anything. I can't really work out why I care about that thing. And then over time, they just sort of come together and coalesce. And so the Glass Cathedral's name actually comes from an exam I sat when I was 18. I was doing A levels and I read a paragraph. So this is a paragraph I read for probably 20 minutes when I was 18. I hadn't read the book.
You're like a magpie. Like you pick up all the shiny things and then you incorporate them into your life. It's really
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
So it was a book called Oscar and Lucinda by Peter Carey, an Australian writer. And in it, the scene that's described is of a glass church that has somehow become sort of unhinged from its moorings and it's floating down a river. So you've got a glass church, life-size glass church, floating down a sort of rapid river. There actually is something in the church, but I didn't remember that there was a person in the church. I reread the book later on. All I thought it was empty. And then there was a dragonfly and it was hitting against the glass and it didn't have a concept of glass. So it didn't know what it was hitting against, but all it knew is that it wanted to get beyond the glass. And so as a sort of, metaphor for human understanding and the limits of human. So then I don't know why it came to me when I was thinking, what should I call, they are boxes with a glass front. And that passage came to my mind.
That's amazing. It's a great title. I remember seeing it for the first time going, oh, yeah, I totally see that. Well, because also these are like little cathedrals of your life, like these commissions that you're doing in these big moments. They are kind of metaphorically the cathedrals that mark our lives, right? The
Absolutely.
big stuff, the big stuff. So you have these series that you've done. I mean, oh gosh, they're so fun. It's books and movies and people and, your series that you did. How did those come about? And did you do exhibits for those?
Yeah. So to keep myself inspired creatively, I mean, I'm inspired by the commissions, but I also I have my own things I want to explore. So, and I do love a good theme. There's probably a word for a person who loves to theme everything in their lives, and that would be me. Books, it doesn't have to be particularly exciting. So I would take a theme, and the ones I've done are books, cinema, circus, California, and then
And you have a people one, right? You
and
have a
a
lot of
people
women
one called
characters.
Star Stuff. Yeah. So not with Star Stuff, but with the others, I created a collection of work around the theme, and then I tried to work out how to get it seen. I have done that in various ways. So probably the most sort of successful public facing one was the circus themed exhibition. And there I probably had 20 different gorgeous circus boxes. And Anthropology, the clothing shop in
Oh,
London, Road, they actually had a gallery as part of their flagship store. So they gave over the gallery for my show. So I had an opening night and top hats. And it it's just an excuse to make more work that is not necessarily that commercial as well, because obviously it matters to me in some respect whether work is sellable. When it's not a commission, obviously that's pre-sold, but when I come up with new designs, I will always make work that I want to make, but it's nice to be able to just make a celebration of something. So the cinema theme boxes are great because that's an ongoing thing. There's a beautiful shop gallery in Telluride called Mix, and they love my work and they've held it there for many years. And the Telluride Film Festival obviously is a fixture there. And so every year during the Telluride Film Festival, they put up my cinema themed boxes. So, I have the stars looking at my work, and
the
that's
Truman
fun.
Show, I've seen that box in lots of different, even non-miniature communities. Your Truman Show one with him
Uh,
standing on the stairs. That's a really cool box. They all are, but that one just for some reason the abyss and how he's knocking on the door. And your concepts, like you said, I mean, they're simple, but they're so profound. The overall message kind of hits you over the head with these tiny little people, which I just think is the coolest thing in the world. Do you
Oh.
have any themes that you haven't done that you want to do?
So I feel like gentle shifts in perspective are how you change the world, really. Like everyone's obviously very invested in their perspective, especially when we're all under such threat or feeling of threat. And we live in sort of such a world of uncertainty and fear. So we all put up our defenses and we get fixed. So as an artist, I think a lot about how I can try to address so-called political, they're obviously very
Mm.
personal as well. If you can say show something in a box that challenges someone's idea. So I've done this with politics, where I've put two people in a box who you would think would have incredibly conflicting ideas. In this case, it was a Palestinian and an Israeli.
Oh,
And they aren't. They're actually best friends, and they've both been wounded by they've suffered terrible things in the war and in the ongoing conflict. But I put them in the box together, and then it had a sort of it was just a very powerful piece because I know that it spoke to people on both extremes, and it's obviously become a time where it's quite easy to be extreme, and everyone was moderate, and then suddenly we've realized it's very easy to be moderate when you're not under threat. So in the same way, like just that someone could look into the box, see something that makes them understand the situation in a slightly different way, and then have more compassion and empathy, I suppose. Just give you a space for empathy. Yeah, so that's a long answer, but that's what I would love to use the sort of therapeutic aspect, for want of a better word.
yeah. I've always said artists are going to save the world. That's what I've always thought. I mean, it's got to be the creatives who are going to come in, and they're the most compassionate feeling people. And, wanting to create work that's part of the solution is really a worthy goal for sure. These days, especially. I think my favorite box of yours is the protesters, where they're all in a big group. I know for one thing, as a person who paints miniatures, I know that is, there she is, that's intense work, painting all people and putting them all in a little group. And the oh my gosh, and the hug one, where they're all having a big
Uh,
hug. Those are my two favorite pieces.
I
Maybe it's
love
because I'm from the US, and right now we just need both of those things so much. Both of those boxes a lot right now. Yeah, and I think they're yeah, I just think it's very powerful. So the technical part of it, you got your boxes and you have your stuff. So is your studio kind of like you just have your little sections of everything? You got your little people in one spot, you got your boxes in the other, your glitter station. Is that how it is?
Basically, yeah. I mean, now you know me a bit better, you'll know that it's not like, you know, it's organized chaos. And yes, I love it. I stand at a desk and I just I'll open a drawer and I know my animal figures are there and
Yep.
my little people. So yeah, and all my paints are here and I bring them down and um, yeah, I just work on one tabletop really with a lot of storage space.
Do you have a lot of pieces going at the same time, or you do one at a time?
Always a lot at the same time. Yeah. Although
Sure.
I'm going away for 6 weeks in a week actually, and that's always a nice winding down. So I actually have one that I'm working on now, and it's a good one, and it's one that just when you think that you don't have enough time to do everything you need to do, you add one more thing, and that's what I've just done.
Oh,
And it's
cool.
do you know the film and the book Hamnet, which
Yes.
is yeah. So I just saw it, and
What'd you think? It won. It won the Golden Globe, did it not?
yeah, I think Jessie Buckley. I don't know if it won Best Picture. I don't know if yeah, no, it's gonna sweep. I'm pretty sure it will sweep a lot of awards.
It was powerful, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, and the when you see it, the process by which it was made is really impressive. The director just really trusts in the creative process. They didn't know how it was going to end until a few days before shooting. Anyway, also the film really amplifies the scale of nature relative to people, and in particular the main character who's Agnes, who's Shakespeare's wife. So I'm making Agnes in her red dress, and I actually just went to the park and picked up all this bark and lichen and stuff, and I'm gonna create a world for her in a box before I go.
How fun. So when you go away, I tend to like have all my ideas when I go away. I can't shelve it. Do you come back with a million ideas or do you just come back rested?
Neither, because I'm constantly on, like in terms of, and it's not that I'm on thinking of ideas. It's this sort of concept that there's a lot of things going on in my head at any one time. And when it comes together is not under my control really. So there's not a
Yeah.
time that I am more or less creative. And you were saying being in California, like I was very creative there, but it's almost like more of a logistical thing. I think the people were really receptive to my work. And there was a beautiful shop in Fairfax called Trouvé, and Leela, my friend there, you know, she just really gave me a home to show my work to people there. And so obviously as an artist, you know, you can be as driven as you like to make the work, but if you're not selling it and if you're not getting a reception, it's really tricky to stay, you know, in good spirits about things. So yeah, that was what really nourished me, I think, in California.
So this 22 years, your kids were obviously growing up during those years. Do you and your husband, did you find a way to kind of have the balance of, because parenting's hard. I'm just going to say it, parenting's hard. I've got two girls
Yeah.
that are really close in age, you know, and that whole like I want to be creative and I want to do these things, but I've also got this family life. Like what was that like for you guys, especially that you're both artists?
Yeah. Well, we both work from home, which is a sort of blessing and a curse in a way. But I think because I don't mind chaos. Look, when the kids were very little, it was always like it was a gift to each other to let you go and work, you know, which is sort of the opposite of what people think, but that it should be. But we really it was just messy, that's all. It wasn't difficult because we traveled with the kids, we traveled with our art. I'm actually I've written an account of the first 20 years of my working
Oh,
life over the last year and a half because I've got a mailing list. So every few weeks, I would send another email to them 20 times, each one themed on a different aspect of my work
yeah.
and life. And I'm making it into a book. And a big part of it is like just the chaos of our, it's not problematic at all. It's just kind of everything's feeding into each other. So there'll be a chapter about my life as art. Like, what is it to be an artist, two artists with kids? I guess the other thing is we've combined the art with the more commercial licensing side. So we've done books with Chronicle in San Francisco, and this is all my husband's illustrative work, and I do the writing for it mostly. So I guess we had a foundation of making enough money to survive without, well, my art has become a full-time job, but it was sort of gradual how that happened. So there was never any massive pressure. I just slowly transitioned from doing the much more commercial stuff to the art, which became commercial enough to replace that work. So yeah, that's how it happened.
So great. So do you in this miniature community, because there's some wonderful people who work with tiny people
I don't know
and little
anyone except
worlds and
you,
all the
so and you
things.
are wonderful. I'll
Do
take
you
you.
just in the art world in general, do you have any mentors or, you know, kind of buddies that you can talk to about just the process or bouncing things off of each other?
Like, no artists, well, except my husband, but I don't go to him for a living. I don't go to him. He, like, gives me ideas. I'm like, "No, you don't get it, do you?" So but he's good with logistics, and, it was interesting before I moved to California. When I moved to California, I realized that I'd been in London 25 years, and I didn't have any artist friends, and I moved to
Oh,
California, and all my friends were artists suddenly, and it was amazing, you know, I just couldn't believe it. And I've come back here and I have a lot of support, but it's not from artists, it's from people in like aligned fields. I'm working with an amazing designer on this book. My best friend she creates rituals, you know, and so we have hours long conversations about each other's work and it's brilliant, but it's not coming at it from an art world perspective. And I've always been outside of the art world
That's a superpower, I think, to be able to talk to other people in fields where you can connect it, but it doesn't have to be the same work. Whereas artists
Exactly.
sometimes when they get together, you can go down that artist road and you're like, oh, but you're both, lost or whatever. But it's nice sometimes if you have like a left brain friend that can sit with you and talk to you about things. I love that. And I wanted to know, kind of just about people starting out because this is an interesting time. It's actually an amazing time to be an artist because you can reach the world online rather than I think you and I are around the same age. I mean, back then it was galleries or fairs. That was pretty much it. Do you have any advice for someone who's got kind of a niche, thing like this, a piece of art or a body of work that's very, very specific? Do you have any advice for how they can sell it, how they can get out into the world, make it happen?
Look, the starting point is it's really difficult. Any advice it's not like a silver bullet, but what's helped me has the best piece of advice I can give is build a mailing list, which sounds so prosaic, but
Well, you hear that a lot though,
to
yeah.
not rely on social media for obvious reasons, like partly because you're just, a bit of a victim to the whims of the people running it, but also it turns you into something a bit different from it probably makes you do things that you don't really want to spend your time doing if you are to be successful on social media. I consider
Mhm.
myself very unsuccessful on social media. And it's not like I haven't tried. I've got 8,000 followers. That's pretty amazing, and but it doesn't mean much because I post something and I'll get 20 likes, maybe 40 likes. So saying
You're not a
that,
slave to the algorithm.
I would say that's like a nice way to put it. Like I'm just not smart enough to
No, but you're making art though. You're not making reels, you're making art, which is
yeah,
important.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But saying that, of course, people do see you on social media. You do make sales. It is important. I guess I would say be aware of how you build things, like what your incentives are. Sam Harris talks about incentives. He's a podcast and a meditation guy. So, like, don't structure your business so that you have to make a reel every week if you don't like making reels and it doesn't feel authentic. And I guess that's what I keep coming back to is I work all the time, but the word work just is meaningless to me. It's like my calling, I don't, it's not work. I'm not at a grindstone here. Like I've got bags of glitter and little people. And I love the marketing side as well. Don't get me wrong. And I love the admin side. So I'm just basically a crazy person. But I do love all aspects of it. Another bit of advice, with also a bit left field, is do invest in your work in terms of if you need to spend money by like getting photography done, for example. That was a real game changer for me, and it took me years to like spend a couple of thousand to get my work photographed. And it was really transformative in terms of how I could communicate what I do and how seriously people took me. So, um, yeah, if you can have a balance between if it can be that you're not relying on your art to feed yourself. But another thing is like, which I think artists are quite good at, is just like take a step back and work out what your values are. Like you don't need to have everything fancy. Like we're all just told the whole time everything needs to be fancy. And I have a very simple life, I know I lived in California and I travel a lot and all of that, but it's not because I've made loads of money. It's because I'm kind of we've made enough money, but we're also sort of smart about things, and we don't mind staying somewhere, not top notch, so that we can travel, or we don't mind not eating out so that we can buy art materials, or like so. Just like
Mhm.
focus your attention on if it's your calling, you need to focus on it, and don't be distracted by the shiny things that advertisers or Instagram says you should have.
That's great advice. I
I mean,
totally agree.
it's a bit generic, but
No, no. I mean, and knowing what you value, that's the biggest thing. Do I value time? Do I value having fancy things? Because some people do. Or do I value having a studio chock full of supplies that are top notch? Yeah, it depends on, but the algorithm shouldn't dictate your life as an artist. I totally
yeah.
agree. Yeah. Well, where can people buy your work, commission you, see your work, all the things?
The best place is online, on my website. I have, as you know, hundreds and hundreds of examples of custom work, as well as all the sort of classic designs, which are more off the, I make them personalized, but they're not fully custom. So my website is the best place. And then if you're lucky enough to live in Telluride, you'll see work there. I have a few galleries dotted around. They're listed on my website. So there's a lovely shop in Fairfax. But generally, people should feel absolutely free to give me a call or drop me a line and just like tell me what they're thinking. Of course, there's never any obligation. It's just a conversation. And
Yeah.
it's nice even just to think about what you would have in the box yourself, like what would you want to capture if you could just capture one thing? And you look at it. I have ones that I've made for myself. Look in them all the time, like, oh my God, that time in Botswana, it was so young. And, you know,
That would be like on my mantle, full front and center, like having a glass cathedral. Yes, because it, like you said, it's the most important moment, but it's also really aesthetically cool. I mean, it's a
oh
neat way
yeah,
to commemorate a
all
moment,
this.
and you've got such a great thing going there. Do you have a favorite piece? Do you have one that's kind of near and dear to you?
There's a few obviously for different reasons, but I have to say a woman's work, which is, I have her here, but I don't have the glitter.
Uh,
The reason I have all these little figures here is actually because part of the book that I'm making, they're going to be a whole lot of little icons of figures that represent different times of my life. So this is one. I've got
oh my goodness, you're going to have Lisas, all the different Lisas in
like
different
lots of
ages?
Lisa's, but also like little Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Look at her.
Yeah, Little Mermaids, things
Oh
I
my,
wish I
you're
was.
taking a lot of figures and cutting them up, aren't you? And
Not always,
gluing
but
them back
sometimes.
together.
And sometimes. Yeah, more the customization is often in the hair. No,
Mm,
there's so many different figures that, and I know them all so well that if
yeah.
someone asks me for something, I have like an index in my head. But so my favorite piece is the calling, and it's a little woman, and she's sweeping up a huge pile of pink glitter,
I
and
love that one.
I just love it. Yeah,
That's your life,
it is
the
my
glitter,
life.
and it's
Yeah,
your calling.
yeah, exactly.
That goes together really well.
And it's like
Oh,
about everyday things being, also being meaningful, being fun, appreciating them and noticing them. I do happen to literally love sweeping. It's the only bit of housework that I like. But
oh my
yes,
God, bless you. I love ironing. That's my thing.
I actually quite like
Getting
yeah.
the wrinkles out. It's very metaphorical. I love it. Okay, so okay, I have two questions. One little one. What's your favorite tool? What's like the one thing in the studio if you didn't have
My
it, couldn't make anything?
little scalpel.
I don't that's what everybody says. The X-Acto knife. Yeah, you guys call it a scalpel. That's right.
What do you call
And,
it?
an X-Acto knife, it's just the brand. It's like, Kleenex tissue is the brand is Kleenex, and for some reason, we all call it X-Acto knives. But I like the word scalpel, sounds more clinical, what you're doing when you're working on your people. And my very last question for you is, if little Lisa could see the work that big Lisa is doing now,
Oh,
grown-up Lisa, what would she appreciate the most about you honoring this work?
oh, that would make me cry. Little Lisa cried all the time, actually. Well, that's such a lovely question. So I think she would just be happy that you know, I'd taken those bits of sparkly glass and all the magpie things that I treasured and the shells. I still have the shells that I collected when I was a child. So I'm literally like, she'll just be thrilled that I still like the things that I did when I was a child. I remember when I was a child, I swam in the sea all the time and the adults around me didn't swim. And I remember thinking, I don't want to grow up and not want to swim anymore. And I went through a transition time when it was like the water's getting colder and colder.
Mm.
I was like, relatively, and I just forced myself to swim with that in mind. And then and now I love swimming. And so it's that same thing of like, oh, I'm so lucky that I can still see through the eyes of my child self.
Yeah, and we're all better for it, Lisa. We're better for it, seeing your art. Yeah.
Thank you so,
Thank you
so
so
much.
much. It was so lovely to meet you, and when we go to London, which is
Yeah.
hopefully in the next
Oh,
year,
we
I'd love to see
love
you. I'd
that.
love to see your
Yeah.
stuff in
You'll have
person.
to
Yeah.
come. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Godspeed with all of the commissions,
Thank
and
you.
enjoy the tiny things and keep collecting glitter. It's one of the best things we can do.
All right.
All right. Bye. If you loved this episode, make sure you're subscribed on Apple or Spotify podcasts or the YouTube channel so you don't miss the stories and wisdom these incredible artists share. I'd love to see you inside my newsletter, Small by Design. On YouTube, just tap the link in the description. On Apple Podcasts, scroll to the bottom of the show notes. You can follow along on Instagram at Laura Blair Art Studio for my art and at Tiny Worlds Big Stories for podcast updates. If you're feeling generous, a 5-star rating helps other miniature fans find the show. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time in another tiny world with a big story.